The term clericalism gets thrown around a lot by the powers that be in the church today. Few people question what it means, yet the term is an important one in church history, and quite frankly, it's not getting used correctly by the usual suspects. I'm going to go over two definitions of clericalism and then explain why I think we should go with one definition over the other. Like any other politicized term, it's important to understand it. The way it's being used today reminds me of terms like climate change, or compassionate conservative, or Green New Deal, or nationalism, or so many other political secular terms from across the ideological spectrum that have been abused and rendered almost meaningless. Let's dive into this. The first definition will be one you've heard, if not explicitly, which comes from Pope Francis and his supporters. Pope Francis, in his address to the Synod Fathers at the Synod 2018, gave the following definition of clericalism. Clericalism arises from an elitist and exclusivist vision of vocation that interprets the ministry received as a power to be exercised rather than as a free and generous service to be given. This leads us to believe that we belong to a group that has all the answers and no longer needs to listen or learn anything. Clericalism is a perversion and is the root of many evils in the church. We must humbly ask forgiveness for this, and above all create the conditions so that it is not repeated. It is an approach that not only nullifies the character of Christians, but also tends to diminish and undervalue the baptismal grace the Holy Spirit has placed in the heart of our people. Clericalism, whether fostered by priests themselves or by laypersons, leads to an excision in the ecclesial body that supports and helps to perpetuate many of the evils that we are condemning today. To say no to abuse is to say an emphatic no to all forms of clericalism. Again, that was Pope Francis' address to the Synod Fathers at the opening of the Synod 2018 on the undermining of young people, undermining of the faith, and the undermining of vocational discernment. Toronto priest Father Thomas Rosica names and defines clericalism with reference to the Holy Father, who he says uses clericalism to mean a kind of ecclesiastical narcissism, as well as a club mentality and a corrupt system of cronyism. In an article published on NCR on August 18th, 2018, perhaps with the poorest timing possible, given that the Vigano testimony would appear only a week later, Rosica, Canada's version of Father James Martin, would offer a simpler one that is astonishing given that we have learned in the past 4 months. Clericalism, a club mentality and a corrupt system of cronyism, and an ugly omerta that has seriously infected the church. That's ironic given what omerta is, which is the Italian mafia's secret oath system that they would take to protect their secrets and essentially kill anyone who would oppose them. That's ironic given the things that have happened in the 4 months. And think about that definition, given what we know of the Lavender Mafia, the St. Gallen Mafia, the Pact in the Catacombs, and the fact that Archbishop Vigano and Father Kalchik have gone into hiding due to their respective roles in illustrating the nature of the current phase of the crisis in the church. There's a reason that some people refer to the activities of the powers that be today as sort of homo-clericalism. In that same article, Father Rosica quotes then Cardinal Bergoglio in his address to the conclave on March 7th, 2013, just days before his election to the papacy. When the church does not come out of itself to evangelize, he said, it becomes self-referential and then gets sick. That inward-lurking church bent over on itself, obsessed with her own image, which doesn't look sufficiently to Christ and doesn't reflect him, his light and his love for those walking in darkness, quickly succumbs to what he called the worst evil of all, a spiritual worldliness, living in itself, of itself, for itself. That's really ironic also, given the lack of evangelization today from missionary groups. In the post-conciliar era, evangelization missionary work is down across the board in the name of ecumenism. It's been replaced by the philosophy, or theology if you want to call it that, of accompanyism. An example of this is the using of clericalism as the excuse in these sex abuse scandals.
Bishop Persico believes clericalism has contributed to the perpetuation of sexual predator priests.
I think clericalism is a problem because it isolates the person. Some get on a career track and they're not too concerned about the damage behind them. Others behave like it's the old boys club, clerics only. Don't deal with the laity, don't talk to the laity. We're better than they are. And I think that has bred a lot of this. Well, I don't have the magic potion, but I think to realize in the beginning that we are all members of the body of Christ, but given different roles in the church, where these are not exclusive in the sense that if I become a priest, I'm better than a lay person, or if I'm married, I'm better than a single person. We're in this together in order to serve the needs of the church and carry out Christ's mission.
Let's have a look at the classic definition of clericalism, if we can find it. You'll see why I say that in a moment. According to the Catholic Encyclopedia, clericalism can be defined as a pejorative term that refers to an excessively professional attitude or conduct on the part of members of the clergy. It is often combined with the opinion that the clergy are somehow superior to the laity. Manifestations of clericalism can be found in an undue attachment to or use of clerical garb, other signs of the clerical state, or other privileges. Note, though, that my copy of the Catholic Encyclopedia is a post-conciliar copy, and that's important here. And it's one that promotes the democratization of the clergy. One of the great failures of the post-conciliar era is the abandonment of the habit and clericals by religious and priests. Rare is it that the monk or nun who wears their habit in public, or the priest his collar for that matter, though that practice is making a comeback among many priests and religious in some quarters today, and thank God for that. So going further back than my post-conciliar copy of the Catholic Encyclopedia, we find, mostly diving into various academic sources, the rather simple definition of clericalism that can be defined as the application of the formal, church-based leadership or opinion of ordained clergy, including bishops, popes, or even religious, in matters of either the church or broader political and socio-cultural importance. In other words, it is the recognition de jure of the hierarchical nature of both the church and society, and the rejection of the separation of church and state, a rejection that the church had insisted upon until the revolution of the 1960s. In practice today, the debate centers on the leadership of the parishes, diocesan offices, and church nonprofits, and the role of the clergy therein. If you've ever wondered why Archbishop Sample of Portland, Oregon is listed as a key member of Oregon Catholic Press, which publishes sappy and vapid hymns found at every diocesan parish in America, the fear of the modern definition of clericalism is why they publish that garbage despite being on paper overseen by a traditionally minded archbishop. Clericalism, a term that really wasn't ever used, but as a concept was understood as the church taking a leadership role in society, and her organs, meaning the priests and bishops and the various rest of them, being active in that leadership role. The origins of the concept of clericalism, as we understand it today, are interesting to say the least. The original usage of the concept of clericalism as a pejorative comes from the Protestant rebellion and its atheistic aftermath. Prominent atheists like Voltaire would make use of the concept, weaponizing it against the church in the post-Reformation hellscape of the Enlightenment Europe. Later, Freemasons would use the term to undermine the church everywhere her institutions were, with an eye towards the promotion of secularism and the de-Christianization of society. Nowhere did this bear more fruit than in the French Revolution, where in the name of liberty and fraternity, the priesthood and church in general were explicitly targeted due to their clericalism. We see in the present definition of clericalism, explicitly in its use as a pejorative, the attempt to eliminate functional differences between the clergy and the laity. This is an explicitly, infallibly condemned proposition by the Council of Trent. That council declared anathema any who attempted to eliminate the differences between the clergy and the laity. There's a reason for that. According to the traditional Catholic teaching, the sacrament of holy orders leaves a permanent, indelible mark on the soul of a man who receives the sacrament. Once someone is a priest, they are a priest forever, even if they have been laicized. Not only did the Council of Trent explicitly condemn this, Pope St. Pius X went further. In his landmark encyclical Pascendi Dominici Gregis, paragraph 38, we see this description of the attack on clericalism. They cry out that the ecclesiastical government requires to be reformed in all its branches, but especially in its disciplinary and dogmatic departments. They insist that both outwardly and inwardly it must be brought into harmony with the modern conscience, which now wholly tends towards democracy. A share in ecclesiastical government should therefore be given to the lower ranks of the clergy, and even to the laity, and authority which is too much concentrated should be decentralized. The Roman congregations, and especially the index and the Holy Office, must be likewise modified. The ecclesiastical authority must alter its line of conduct in the social and political world. While keeping outside political organizations, it must adapt itself to them in order to penetrate them with its spirit. With regard to morals, they adopt the principles of Americanists, that the active virtues are more important than the passive, and are to be encouraged in practice. They ask that the clergy should be returned to their primitive humility and poverty, and that in their ideas and action they should admit the principles of modernism. And there are some who, gladly listening to the teaching of their Protestant masters, would desire the suppression of the celibacy of the clergy. What is there left in the church which is not to be reformed by them and according to their principles? To have prelates who write and speak with that clarity today, that would be astonishing. Understand that, like revolutionaries in all periods of history, the attack on the church always targets the clergy. The reason is simple. To bring the church into alignment with the modern, degenerate world requires reducing the priest to the role of an administrative specialist. They bear some special, sacramentally given duties, even in the synodal church of the New Advent, but we see constant calls for the laity to have a greater role, even in the Eucharistic liturgy during the Mass. This is tantamount to an attack on the sacraments themselves. If you like videos like this, like and share this video and subscribe, and click the notification bell below. If you're interested in supporting my work, there are various options below, along with links to my Twitter, the Sources blog, and the Return to Tradition Facebook page. Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony Stein. Ave Maria.